If you intend to buy XYZ Corporation at 11:30 this morning and sell it out before the close today, I mean, that is, in our view, that is a very risky transaction, because we think 50% of the time you're going to suffer some harm or injury. If you have a time horizon on a business, we think the risk of buying something like Coca-Cola at the price we bought it at a few years ago is essentially so close to nil in terms of our prospective holding period. But if you ask me the risk of buying Coca-Cola this morning and you're going to sell it tomorrow morning, I say that's a very risky transaction. Now, as I pointed out in the annual report, it became very fashionable in the academic world, and then that spilled over into the financial markets, to define risk in terms of volatility, of which beta became a measure. But that is no measure of risk. The risk in terms of our super cat business is not that we lose money in any given year. We know we're going to lose money in some given day, that is for certain, and we're extremely likely to lose money in a given year. Our time horizon of writing that business, would be at least a decade, and we think the probability of losing money over a decade is low. So we feel that in terms of our horizon of investment, that is not a risky business, and it's a whole lot less risky than writing something that's much more predictable. Interesting thing is that using conventional measures of risk, something whose return varies from year to year between plus 20% and plus 80% is riskier as defined than something whose return is 5% a year every year. We just think the financial world has gone haywire in terms of measures of risk. We look at what we do. We are perfectly willing to lose money on a given transaction, arbitrage being an example, any given insurance policy being another example. We are perfectly willing to lose money on any given transaction. We are not willing to enter into transactions in which we think the probability of doing a number of mutually independent events but of a similar type has an expectancy of loss. And we hope that we are entering into our transactions where our calculations of those probabilities have validity. And to do so, we try to narrow it down. There are a whole bunch of things we just won't do because we don't think we can write the equation on them. But we basically, Charlie and I, by nature, are pretty risk averse, but we are very willing to enter into transactions. If we knew it was an honest coin and someone wanted to give us 7 to 5 or something of the sort on one flip, how much of Berkshire's net worth would we put on that flip? Well, it would sound like a big number to you. It would not be a huge percentage of the net worth, but it would be a significant number. We will do things when probabilities favor us. Charlie?
Yeah, I would say we try and think like Fermat and Pascal, as if they'd never heard of modern finance theory. I really think that a lot of modern finance theory can only be described as disgusting.
We think, at least I think, I'm extraordinarily well treated by the society. I think most people with high incomes are. I think if you transported most of them to Bangladesh or Peru or something, they would find out how much of it is them and how much is the society. And I think there's nothing better than a market system in terms of motivating people and in terms of producing the goods and services that the society wants. But I do think it gets a little out of whack in terms of what the productivity maybe of an outstanding teacher compared to somebody who is good at figuring out the intrinsic value of businesses. I don't have a better system on the income side, but I think society should figure out some way to make those who are particularly blessed, in a sense, to have talents that get paid off enormously in a market system, to give back a fair amount of that to the society that produces that. The question about Berkshire being I think was it Rich Man's Mutual Fund or something like that. We don't look at it that way at all. We look at it as a collection of businesses, and ideally we would own all of those businesses. So it's to the extent that a mutual fund owns stock in a lot of companies and diversifies among businesses, and we try to own a lot of businesses ourselves. I guess that's true, but I guess you could say the same thing of General Electric or an operation like that. We are more prone to buy pieces of businesses than the typical manager, but we are trying to do, in a sense, the same thing Jack Welch is trying to do at General Electric, which is try to own a number of first-class businesses. He gets to put the imprint of his own management, which I think is very good, on those businesses, and we are more hands-off both in the businesses we own outright and in the ones we own pieces of. But we're going at it the same way, and General Electric has been very successful under Jack's leadership in doing it his way. We think in terms of what we bring to the game and the problems of putting money to work all the time that our own system is, will work best for us. Charlie?
Yeah, I've got nothing to add to that.
This is a question for Mr. Munger. In your most recent letter to shareholders in Wesco's annual report, you calculated the intrinsic value of Wesco at about $100 per share and compared that to the then current market price of Wesco of about $130 per share. In the same letter, you stated that it was unclear whether at then current market prices Berkshire or Wesco presented a better value to prospective purchasers. In light of that, would you compare the intrinsic value of Berkshire to its current market price?
Well, the answer to that is no. Berkshire has never calculated intrinsic value per share and reported it to the shareholders, and Wesco never did before this year. We changed our mind at Wesco because we really thought some of the buyers had gone a little crazy, and a lot of things were being said to prospective shareholders that, in our opinion, were unwise. And we don't really like attracting, even though we've had nothing to do with it, we don't like attracting people in at high prices that may not be wise. So we departed from our long precedent, and we did, in the Wesco report, make an estimate of intrinsic value per share. But we're not changing the general policy. That was just a one-time quirk.
Well, and also I think it's true that the Wesco intrinsic value per share can be estimated by anyone within fairly close limits. It just isn't that complicated because there aren't a number of businesses there that have values different than carrying values, or where they are, they're all footnoted in terms of numbers. So it'd be almost impossible to come up with numbers that are significantly different than the number Charlie put in there. Berkshire has assets that, number one of which would be the insurance business, that it's clear have very significant excess values, but one person might estimate those at maybe 3 times what somebody else would estimate them at. That's less true of our other businesses, but it's still true in a way, so that Berkshire's range would be somewhat greater. And as Charlie, we don't want to disappoint people. We also don't want to disappoint ourselves. But we have our own yardsticks for what we think is doable. We try to convey that as well as we can to the people who are partners in the business. And I think that we saw some things being published about Wesco that simply might have led to, probably did lead to some expectations that simply weren't consonant with our own personal expectations, and that leaves us uncomfortable.
시청해 주셔서 감사합니다. 구독과 좋아요로 채널을 응원해 주시면 더 좋은 콘텐츠로 보답하겠습니다.